Shabbat Shalom. I want to begin this morning by sharing with you a little bit of my time in college. I had a professor from Argentina who was my cinema professor. And he used to tell us that making movies in the United States was tremendously different from making movies any other place in the world. Europe, Latin America, anywhere you could think about it, the United States and their movie-making machine was completely different. And of course, we were all expecting an anti-American speech at the time, but he simply said, they love underdogs. If you want to make money, make a movie about underdogs. If there isn't an underdog in the movie will not succeed unless it's really, really good. But if you have an underdog, it could be just any movie, and you'll make money. So, remember Hoosier, Cinderella Man, Million Dollar Baby, Rudy, Miracle, about the hockey team, the Jackie Robinson story, Friday Night Lights, remember the Titans, and of course Rocky, right? Who can forget Rocky? All of those are underdogs. What is it with America and underdogs? Well, I don't think it's unique to America. I think that people in general love the story of the powerless becoming powerful. I think that in general people appreciate the human story involved in bettering yourself and making something of yourself when you come from nothing. And in essence, by the way, that is the story of our people. Or at least, that was the story of our people until we became a powerful people in our own right. Through sweat, blood, tears, genocide, and everything in between. So remember, if nothing else I say today, that Americans love the underdog. And keep that in the back of your mind for the weeks ahead. Over 2,000 rockets, not 20, not 200, 2,000 rockets descended on the state of Israel 4 days ago in less than 24 hours from the Gaza Strip. Now, Bret Stephens wrote a brilliant, brilliant op-ed where he asks the question, how does a destitute people who live under siege, who have nothing to eat, who have no water, electricity, or no help from anyone, or so we've been led to believe, have 2,000 rockets to send in one day? And mind you, they have 20,000 rockets, or 30,000, we don't know. So if you're under siege, and you have no food to feed your children who you care so much about, why do you spend your money on rockets? This is question number one. Number one. The answer to that question, unfortunately, was given so many years ago to us by Golda Meir. When they love their children more than they hate us, that's when this problem is going to be solved. And everything we see and everything in between is just a commentary on that statement by Golda Meir. If my child was dying of hunger, really, the last thing I would think about would be buying a rocket to inflict pain on my neighbor before I feed my child. Hey, but that's me. A normal, sensitive person, or so I think. In the 1960s, America loved Israel. They loved the Jews. They loved the fact that after they gave us their back and left us to die in Europe, we came back as a people, dignified, walking up straight, defending ourselves. Nobody could believe that in 6 days, I'm not even going to talk about 48, that in 6 days in 67 we defeated all of the Arab armies in the Middle East. They loved us. We were the underdog. But the moment the underdog grew up, the moment we could defend ourselves, the moment we proved to the world we no longer needed them, the moment we said to the world, no longer will we die and burn in places like Auschwitz, the world again turned its back on us. Because no number of rockets is going to be enough. And let me tell you why. Have you heard any recent commentary on the genocide of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar? Have you seen anybody on Al Jazeera or any other news network like CNN or even Fox or any other network espousing the plight of the Uyghurs in China for more than an hour a month? Those are Muslims too, by the way. So it's not standing up for the Muslims that are quote unquote oppressed by the state of Israel, is sticking it to the Jews. And these are two different things. Please understand that. This is a narrative that has been changed, and our children, many of them, can no longer understand. I want to make another statement that I hope you remember. What you post in Facebook matters little. Nobody cares. Because Facebook at this point, and Twitter, and all the social media, we understand it to be filled up with fake news and things that are not right. What matters is honestly who survives. And we are going to do whatever it takes to protect our people. I don't care how many Palestinians with flags I see on the street. We're going to do whatever it takes to protect our people. I cannot say that enough times. Do not be swayed by the headlines of dying Palestinian children. Every year, and it's unbelievable that every year when I give this sermon, it's almost like I can program it. Once a year I have to preach this sermon. Every year after I preach this sermon, I get email from people who say, how could you not be sensitive to the Palestinian children? Look, it's not that I'm not sensitive, but I care about my children too. I do. I care about their children. I honestly care more about their children than they care about their children. But at this point, after 2,000 rockets in a day, or 1,000 yesterday, I have to look out for my people. The Torah portion that we read is Shabbat, Parashat Bamidbar, starts with the census of the Jewish people. Anyone over the age of 21 has to be counted who's a male. And the commentators of the Torah ask, why do we need to count the Jewish people? If God is so powerful, if God is almighty, doesn't God know how many there are? And the answer is yes, of course God knows, but God wants us to know. He wants us to know what our numbers can do. He wants us to know that God is not always going to be there to defend us and protect us and make us cross the sea. That at some point or another we have to fend by ourselves, and we need to rely on who we are, our numbers, and who we are as a people. So I'm going to plead with you today, even if it's difficult, even if it takes you 5 seconds. I sent an email to the congregation, and all of those of you who are watching me on the internet, please tell your friends. Now put it on social media. I sent an email out where I asked to click on a button to send a letter to our congressional delegation so they know how important it is to us that they stand up for Israel. And this is important. When I first started advocating as a pro-Israel activist, which I didn't know a Jew had to choose to do that. I thought that all Jews would do that automatically. But when I came to this country, it turned out that I had to become an activist and an advocate, because not all Jews think like I do. Not all Jews think that Israel has to survive. So it's very important that you contact our congressional delegation and tell them how important it is that they keep Israel the way it is, that they have Israel's back, that Israel's America's ally. That if Israel goes, America goes. I sent that email, it's just a couple of clicks, Please, please read it and act on it. When I first started doing this, I once asked a very innocent question. What happens the day that they discover they can do the same that we do? What happens the moment when there's more Muslims than Jews in the United States, and when they discover that they can actually pressure the congressional delegations? Well, my friends, we are living in that day right now. Look, I am not going to bite my tongue, and I'm not going to watch my words. Every Republican in Congress has supported Israel. The one that has not done it is because either he or she was on vacation or didn't get early to their office. We have a tremendous problem in the Democratic Party. Tremendous. The head of the Democratic Party in the state of Nevada sent a horrible, disgusting, vile, and anti-Semitic letter about what is happening in Israel. Those of us who are Republicans, we can sleep at night. Those of us who are Democrats, we have a lot of work to do. And by the way, this is not and should not be a partisan issue. We need everyone's help. I don't need people telling me, I told you so. I need people telling me, we'll do whatever it takes. We're going to make the phone calls. This is when our community needs to mobilize. Look, there was a time when we took congressional support for granted. That is not the time today. I need you to understand that. Let me explain to you what's happening, besides my rant on how to defend ourselves from the United States. There are things that we can do. What I mentioned is one of them. The conflict that we're in right now is also politically motivated. The Palestinians had elections in the West Bank, which were postponed. The end of Ramadan is a tremendously explosive moment in time every year. And Israel was going herself through election problems and government forming problems. At the heart of this conflict are 6 Palestinian families living in Sheikh Jarrah that, according to what you read on the internet, have been evicted, which is not true. They haven't been evicted. They still live in their homes. This case is in front of the Israeli Supreme Court, and it's been argued for a long time. And you're going to hear it first from me. I do not like fake news. Those lands in Sheikh Jarrah were always in Jewish hands. This is not Palestinian land. This is not Arab land. So what you see, and the riot at the Temple Mount, which, yes, the settlers should have never been allowed up there to march at the end of Ramadan, all of this gave Hamas an excuse to send the rockets, to incite the Palestinians to violence, to make Fatah, the government of the West Bank, completely irrelevant in Palestinian life. That's on one side. And that's why they keep sending the rockets. Because the more they bomb Israel and the more Jews that die, the more credibility they have on the Palestinian street. On the other hand, when you see the riots happening in the mixed population cities in Israel, like Yaffo and Lod, where Arabs or Jews are going to the street and just hitting each other. We saw lynchings on both sides. We were horrendous things to witness. And the question, by the way, is, where's the Israeli police? Every single news anchor in Israel is asking the question, where's the Israeli police? The government had to dispatch the border police because the Israeli police has been slowly dismantled by Benjamin Netanyahu for the last 5 years. Since they were investigating them, investigating him, he has stripped the police to less than 50,000 officers, 50,000 policemen. There was no commanding officer of the police for the last 3 years. And it became a political appointment for someone who would guarantee not to persecute the prime minister. So in a country where you need at least 70,000 policemen, there's less than 50,000. They get over 10,000 calls a night. Where should they go? And then there's another problem. If you remember the Ethiopian marches a couple of years ago, when an Ethiopian was killed by the police. So it's a new law in Israel that the police cannot touch protesters. They cannot touch Israeli citizens. So the police, the blue police in Israel, can no longer control a protest of Israeli citizens. They can't push them. Think of what I'm describing. All of this has created the perfect storm. So it's not only Hamas shooting at us and Israel defending herself, but also deep political crisis on both sides. Now, if there's one phrase that I become to loathe in the American language is, Israel has the right to defend it herself. Who doesn't have a right to defend him or herself? Does the United States have a right to defend itself? Do we go around saying, the United States has a right to defend itself, Mexico has a right to defend itself, South Africa has a right to defend it? No! It's obvious that a sovereign nation has a right and a duty to defend her citizens. Only the Jews have to be given permission. Only the Jews. Because you know how the world likes us? They like us dead, without being able to defend ourselves. You think I'm exaggerating? Think of the 1930s. This country, our country, was one of the first countries to close its doors to Jewish refugees. Need I say more than that? They like us powerless and behind the fence. But I have news for the world. Never again are we going to give them that pleasure or that image. I need you to write our congressional delegation. It is so important. If there's nothing else you do in the next week, which is hopefully the time that this will last and no more, this is what I beg you, please do. And now, the last thing I'll say today. Our children in college campuses, in high schools, are being bombarded with Palestinian propaganda, more so than ever before. Children that grew up here, children that I know their families well, children that I love, you should see what they're posting on social media. That is the saddest day for our people. They have managed to insert their narrative into the brain of our children. I need you as parents to take a stand. Of course you're not here, but I hope you're listening. And I'll send you my sermon. And I need you to listen. If you are the parent of a high school student or a college student, I need you to do something about it. I need you to help your children. This is more important than going out to dinner. This is more important than socializing or living in the right house in the right neighborhood and being zoned for the right school right now. Your children are in pain. You cannot understand what they're going through in their personal lives, in their social media accounts. I need your help. Please care about our people. Look, Israel will survive. Israel will be okay. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm worried about what happens here. Quick anecdote. The BDS movement. The BDS movement never touched Israel. Hasn't touched, hasn't even chipped Israel. But it took a toll on us. It did. Because the arena where it was fought, or still being fought, is in our college campuses, in the streets of our cities, not in Israel. We are the ones that lose. I need your help. It is not only about Israel, it is also about us. The American Jewish community needs to understand this is not anti-Zionism, this is anti-Semitism. The American Jewish community needs to understand this is not only directed at Israelis, it's directed at us. We're all together in this. And trust me, we will feel the consequences. Not with bombs. We won't go to shelters. But if you want your children to be proud Jews, to stand up for what's right, we need your help. Like Bamidbar says, let's have a census. Let's come up with the numbers. And let's understand that God is not going to solve this for us. We are in it first, ourselves, and we're fighting for a spiritual life, not only for a physical life. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach. I'm going to ask us to please rise as we continue